The night was silent, the kind of silence that makes a man hear the noise inside his own heart. I, Naeem, had always lived with that kind of noise. Memories of hunger, humiliation, and an endless struggle to survive. Life had made me grow up too soon. When I finally found a job at Sheikh Abdul Majid's mansion, it felt like a stroke of destiny. The place was magnificent. White marble floors, golden chandeliers, endless hallways echoing with footsteps of servants. But I knew my place. I was not a guest of luxury. I was a servant of wealth. Sheikh Abdul Majid was a man feared by everyone. His voice alone could freeze blood in one's veins. His commands were law, and his temper, a storm no one wished to face. But if the Sheikh's presence was intimidating, his daughter Marukh was something else entirely. Beautiful yet proud, her gaze sharp like glass. She had grown up surrounded by luxury, and perhaps that was why she looked down upon people like me. To her, servants were not humans with hearts, but tools of convenience. Every day she found new ways to remind me of my position. "Bring me water," she would say with a voice dripping with arrogance. "Clean the carpet again." "It doesn't shine enough," I never protested. I swallowed my anger, reminding myself that poverty gives no space for pride. Yet beneath my quiet obedience, there was a fire, a promise to prove that honesty and hard work could make me something more than just a nameless worker. But destiny had a darker plan. One night, as the clock struck midnight, someone knocked on my door. It was the maid. "Madame Marukh wants warm milk," she said. I was puzzled. At this hour? Still, a servant doesn't question. I went to the kitchen, warmed the milk, and walked toward her room. My heartbeat quickened as I reached her door. I knocked softly. "Come in," her voice said from inside. The room smelled of perfume and candlelight. Marukh sat in a white gown, her eyes unreadable. I placed the tray on the table and turned to leave when suddenly she screamed, "Help! He's pulling my scarf!" I froze, unable to move or breathe. Then before I could say a word, she ripped her own clothes and began shouting again. Within moments, footsteps thundered down the corridor. The sheikh burst into the room. Marukh cried, "He tried to force me!" The sheikh's face turned crimson. His eyes blazed with fury. "You animal!" he roared. "How dare you? I tried to speak. It's a lie!" But my words drowned in the chaos. Within minutes, he called for the local cleric. "There's only one way to protect my daughter's honor," the sheikh declared. "She will marry him right now." And in that moment, under trembling candlelight and God's silent sky, I went from servant to husband, bound not by love but by accusation. The night that chained me to Marukh through a false accusation was the longest of my life. By dawn, I was no longer the servant who once swept the marble floors. I was the sheikh's son-in-law. Yet instead of pride, there was a heaviness inside me that words could not carry. My hands trembled, not with joy but with disbelief. I had been forced into a bond that felt like a punishment wrapped in sacred vows. When the morning light slipped through the curtains, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Who was I now, a husband or still a servant wearing a new title? My thoughts had no answer. The silence of the room was broken when the door opened and Marukh entered. She stood there in a silk robe, the same arrogance gleaming in her eyes. "Congratulations," she said with a smirk. "You're my husband now." Did you ever imagine a servant would climb this high? Her tone was cruel, each word dipped in mockery. I looked up and asked quietly, "Why did you do this?" What crime had I committed to deserve such humiliation? She laughed softly, circling me like a predator playing with its prey. Crime? Oh, Naeem, this was never about crime. It was about power. I wanted to see how far I could push destiny, and you were the perfect test. You see, I don't lose. Ever her words cut deeper than any sword. I had thought maybe she would regret her lie or at least show a trace of guilt, but there was none. To her, my life was merely a game, a distraction from her boredom. I felt a sting of helpless anger, but I kept my voice steady. "Games end one day," I said. "And when truth arrives, it doesn't ask for permission." She met my gaze unfazed. Truth is what I decide it to be. Then she turned and left, leaving behind the scent of roses and the echo of cruelty. Later that day, Sheikh Abdul Majid gathered the household staff and announced, "From today, Naeem is my son-in-law. He will live here with dignity." The servants bowed, but I could feel their whispers following me like shadows. Their eyes carried a mix of envy, disbelief, and suspicion. To them, I was not a husband. I was the servant who had somehow trapped the sheikh's daughter. That evening, when I crossed paths with Maruk again, she looked at me with a faint, knowing smile. I realized then that our marriage was not the beginning of anything. It was a cage, built on deceit and arrogance, and I was its first prisoner. Days turned into weeks, yet the weight of that night never lifted from my chest. Every corner of the mansion seemed to whisper my name in ridicule. The servants' glances were sharp, their murmurs constant. "Look at him," I heard one say. "The servant who became the sheikh's son-in-law." Another replied, "Or maybe the man who deceived the sheikh's daughter." Their words cut through me like invisible knives, but I remained silent. Silence had always been my shield. Maruk, however, continued her reign of cold control. In public, she addressed me with formality, calling me my husband, in front of her father and the guests. But when the doors closed, her words turned venomous. "Don't forget who you really are," she would whisper. "Titles don't change blood." She still ordered me around, "Fetch this, clean that, move those papers," as if I had never stood beside her in marriage. And every time she looked at me, it was not with affection, but with a challenge, as though she enjoyed watching my restraint break, piece by piece. The sheikh's behavior had also changed. His once thunderous voice had softened into cautious politeness when speaking to me. I often caught him watching me quietly, his eyes heavy with something that looked like guilt or fear. When I tried to ask him if something was wrong, he would quickly look away and change the topic. The mansion had grown colder, its marble floors now echoing the footsteps of suspicion. Then one night, I overheard something that sent chills down my spine. As I passed by Maruk's room, I heard her voice, low but trembling. She was on the phone. "Yes, it's done. The marriage happened. No one suspects a thing now, but remember your promise. Don't leave me waiting too long." Her tone was desperate yet secretive. My heart froze. Who was she talking to? What promise? I stepped back quietly, my mind racing. I could no longer ignore the signs, the way she avoided my eyes, her mysterious phone calls, the fear that flickered in the sheikh's gaze. Something dark was buried within these walls, and I had become part of it without knowing. The next morning, I found a folded piece of paper slipped under my door. My hands trembled as I opened it. Written in hurried strokes were the words, "If you value your life, stop asking questions. The truth is heavier than you can carry." I stood there for a long time, staring at the note. The mansion suddenly felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by secrets waiting to explode. That warning note haunted my every breath. I began to see shadows where there were none, to hear whispers in silence. But fear couldn't kill my curiosity. I needed to know why Maruk had trapped me in this marriage and who she was secretly communicating with. Her cruelty now seemed less like arrogance and more like desperation, and someone was controlling her from behind the curtain. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and the mansion glowed in amber light, I decided to search her room. She was in the garden talking with her father, and I knew I had only minutes. My hands shook as I opened her drawer. Beneath folded scarves and jewelry boxes lay a small envelope sealed with red wax. My name wasn't on it, but another was Rehan. I hesitated, then unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant but urgent. "Maruk, soon I will return. Don't let anyone suspect. Our love must remain hidden until I come back. Remember, you are mine forever." The ground beneath me seemed to disappear, my vision blurred with disbelief. Rehan. So this was the man behind her secret phone calls, the reason for her fear, the name that tied every mystery together. I was not her husband by choice, but a shield, a cover to protect her secret relationship. When she returned that night, I waited in silence until she noticed the letter on the table. Her face turned pale for a brief second before she forced a smile. You shouldn't touch things that don't belong to you, Naeem. I stood up slowly. You played with my life, I said, my voice steady but trembling with pain. You accused me of a crime I didn't commit. Forced a marriage to save your own image, and for what? To hide your lover? She crossed her arms and smiled faintly. You finally figured it out. Good. Now maybe you'll stop pretending this marriage means something. Her words struck like daggers. So I was just a pawn in your game? I asked. A pawn? She repeated, her tone soft yet sharp. No, Naeem, you were my protection. My father would have destroyed me if he knew. You saved me without even realizing it. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The woman I had respected despite her cruelty had reduced me to nothing but a convenient lie. She turned her back and whispered, It's better you stay quiet. The truth won't save you. It'll bury you. That night, as I walked out of her room, I realized my marriage was not a bond. It was a trap woven with deceit. And somewhere beyond those marble walls, Rehan was waiting in the shadows, ready to claim what he believed was his. After that night, everything inside me changed. The illusion of being a husband faded. I was merely a mask covering someone else's secret. Yet the question that refused to leave my mind was, why did the sheikh agree so quickly to this marriage without even investigating? His behavior had grown increasingly strange. Whenever our eyes met, he looked away as if afraid that I might see through him. It was not the arrogance of a wealthy man, it was the guilt of someone hiding a dangerous truth. One evening, I gathered the courage to confront him. He sat in his study surrounded by piles of papers and old files, his face pale in the lamplight. Sheikh Sahib, I began carefully, I've been meaning to ask you something. That night, when Mahrukh accused me, why did you rush to marry us? You didn't even question me once, he froze. For a long while, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock. Finally, he said in a voice lower than a whisper, A father's honor is his daughter's name, Naeem. I had no time to think. If the word had spread, my family's dignity would have been destroyed. His reasoning made sense, yet something about his tone felt rehearsed, like a story told too many times. He avoided my gaze, shuffling papers aimlessly. When I tried to ask again, he raised his hand and said softly, Some things are better left buried. The past has claws, my son, then he dismissed me. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words echoed in my mind. The past has claws. What past? What did he mean? And why did he call me my son, a title he had never used before? The following morning, another note appeared under my door, written in the same hurried handwriting as before. Your questions are dangerous. Stop before the truth burns you too. I felt a chill run through me. Someone was clearly watching me, someone who knew every step I took. Later that day, I saw Mahrukh talking on the phone again, her voice urgent and anxious. Yes, everything is under control, she said. He suspects nothing. Don't worry, I'll keep him away. When she noticed me standing at the door, she froze for a heartbeat and then forced a smile. Eavesdropping, Naeem? She asked mockingly. I said nothing, but deep inside, the pieces were starting to align. There was something the sheikh feared, something Mahrukh was hiding, and somewhere in that darkness, the name Rehan connected it all. That night, the mansion no longer felt like a home. It felt like a ticking clock counting down to a storm. The days grew heavier, each one pulling me deeper into a web of deceit. The mansion that once echoed with footsteps now felt like a cage of secrets. I had begun to sense that someone was about to return, as if the whispers in the corridors were warning me of an approaching storm. And then, one evening, it happened. I was sitting in the courtyard when a sudden commotion erupted near the main gate. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, the metallic clang of the gate opening. I stood up and saw a tall stranger step inside. His presence was commanding, sharp eyes, confident walk, and a smile that carried danger. The servant stopped what they were doing, frozen by the tension in the air. He looked straight at me and said calmly, You must be Naeem. His tone was steady, but Something about it made my chest tighten. Before I could respond, he continued, "I've heard a lot about you." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Moments later, Maruk appeared at the staircase. The instant she saw him, her entire face changed. Her cold arrogance melted into trembling joy. "Rayhan," she gasped, her voice breaking. My heart sank. The name I had read on those letters was no longer just ink. It was flesh standing before me. The sheikh arrived seconds later, his face turning crimson as soon as his eyes met Rayhan's. "How dare you set foot here again?" he thundered. "Did I not warn you never to return?" Rayhan didn't flinch. "I came to keep my promise," he said. Maruk is mine, and you know it." The words hit the sheikh like bullets. "Mine," he roared. "You forget who you're speaking to. You're nothing but a disgrace, the son of a traitor." Rayhan stepped closer, his calm now sharper than anger. "You destroyed my father's name. You stole everything he built, and now you call me a traitor's son?" "No, Sheikh, I'm here to reclaim what was taken from us, your daughter's love and my father's dignity." Maruk stood trembling between them, tears glistening in her eyes. "Please stop," she cried. I can't live like this anymore." The sheikh raised his hand, furious, but I stepped forward. "Sheikh Sahib," I said quietly, "blood never washes away shame. It only multiplies it." For the first time, his eyes flickered with hesitation. The mansion seemed to hold its breath. That night, I realized that the storm had truly arrived. Rayhan was back, and his return was not just about love, it was about revenge. And somewhere in the crossfire, my own fate was waiting to be decided. The night after Rayhan's return was one I could never forget. The air in the mansion felt heavy, filled with tension so thick it could almost be touched. No one spoke much, but everyone could sense that the walls of lies were beginning to crack. Rayhan's presence had changed everything. Maruk was restless, the sheikh was uneasy, and I, caught between them, could feel that the truth was inching closer with every breath. Unable to sleep, I wandered toward the old storage room at the far end of the corridor. It was a place no one visited anymore, a room stacked with dusty files, broken furniture, and forgotten records of the sheikh's past business dealings. A strange instinct pulled me there, as if something inside was waiting to be discovered. I lit a small lamp and began to open old drawers, scanning faded papers and crumbling folders. Then at the bottom of a wooden chest, I found a bundle of yellowed documents tied with a silk ribbon. The top sheet read, "Business contract, Abdul Majid and Javed Khan." I froze. The name Javed Khan sounded familiar. Where had I heard it before? My eyes widened as I read further. It was written that Javed Khan and the sheikh had once been partners in a large trade venture, but the partnership ended in betrayal. The sheikh had accused Javed of fraud, taken full control of the wealth, and left him bankrupt. Within months, Javed Khan had died of grief. A chill went through me. Rayhan had said the sheikh ruined his father. Could this be the same man? Could Rayhan be Javed Khan's son? My hands trembled as I turned the next page, and what I saw next nearly stopped my heart. It was a legal note signed by the sheikh himself. "After the death of Javed Khan, his minor son Naeem shall remain under my guardianship until he comes of age." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred. I read it again and again, but the words did not change. I was Javed Khan's son. I was Rayhan's brother. The sheikh had taken me in as a child, hidden my identity, and made me a servant in his house to bury the guilt of what he had done. The truth hit me like lightning. All my years of servitude, humiliation, and confusion now had meaning. The sheikh's fear, Maruk's manipulation, and Rayhan's hatred were all part of the same storm, and I was standing at its center. That night, I stared at the old papers for hours, realizing that my entire life had been built on a lie. The truth I had uncovered refused to let me rest. I sat through the night staring at those papers that had turned my world upside down. The man I had called Sheikh Sahib was not only my master, he was the very person who had destroyed my father and stolen my childhood. The man I had once served had shaped my destiny with deceit. And Rayhan, the one I had seen as my rival, was my own blood. At sunrise, I made a decision. I would confront the sheikh no matter what it cost. I walked into his study while he sat there, lost in thought. My hands trembled, but my voice did not. I placed the papers on his desk and said quietly, "You hid this from me all my life." He looked up, his eyes widening as he saw the documents. His lips quivered. "Where did you find these?" "In the storage room," I said. The truth was buried there, just like my father's name. "You ruined him, took everything, and then took me in as a servant to ease your guilt. Isn't that right?" He lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. For the first time, I saw not power in his face, but weakness. "Naeem," he whispered, "I did what I thought was right for my family." "Your father wronged me. He betrayed my trust." "No," I said sharply. "You betrayed him. You destroyed his life, then pretended to save his son. You made me your servant, your scapegoat, just so the world would never know the truth." Tears gathered in his eyes. "I tried to raise you like a son, miss," he said. I laughed bitterly. "A son? You let your daughter accuse me of the crime I didn't commit. You forced me into a marriage built on shame. You never saw me as a son, you saw me as your debt." He had no reply. The silence between us was heavy, suffocating. Finally, he said, "If I could change the past, I would." "But the past doesn't forgive," I turned away. "Neither does the truth." Later that evening, I overheard Maruk and Rehan speaking in the garden. My heart clenched as I listened from the shadows. "Father is softening," she whispered. "Soon he'll agree to everything. But Naeem, he's in the way." Rehan replied, "Don't worry. He's just a servant who stumbled into our story a servant." The word stabbed me again, even after everything I knew. I was their blood, yet still invisible. That night, I realized this web of lies was far thicker than I thought, and escaping it might cost me everything I had left. Sleep became a stranger after that night. The truth had freed me and imprisoned me at the same time. I was torn between two unbearable realities, one of blood and one of betrayal. Rehan was my brother, yet he saw me as an obstacle. Maruk was my wife by name, yet her heart belonged to him. And the sheikh, who had stolen my father's legacy, now sat in silence, drowning in regret. Every breath I took inside that mansion felt heavier than chains. The following morning, I found another note under my door. This one was shorter, written with bold strokes that carried the smell of finality. "You must choose between your blood and your heart. Tomorrow night, everything ends." For a long time, I stood staring at those words. Blood or heart, both paths led to ruin. But something inside me knew the decision was already made. I had lived as a servant, suffered as a scapegoat, and been humiliated as a husband. Now I would end it as a man who chose truth above all else. That night, the mansion gathered in uneasy silence. A storm raged outside, thunder rumbling like the echo of fate. The sheikh sat in the courtyard, his cane trembling in his hands. Maruk and Rehan stood beside each other, defiant, trembling, and yet united by something dark. I entered slowly, the note clutched in my fist. "This ends tonight," the sheikh said, his voice breaking. "I have carried my pride long enough." "I was wrong about your father, Naeem. I was wrong about everything. But my daughter's dignity," Rehan interrupted sharply. "Dignity? You destroyed my father's life. You think you can hide behind words of repentance now?" Maruk turned to her father, tears glistening on her cheeks. "I love him, Abba. I loved him before all of this. You forced me into a lie to save your name. But I can't keep pretending anymore." Her confession hung in the air like thunder. All eyes turned to me. The sheikh's trembling hand pointed toward me. "It's your decision, Naeem," he said softly. "You can end this feud or fuel it. What you choose tonight will decide all our fates." For a moment, time stopped. I looked at Rehan, my brother, the man I had once seen as an enemy. Then at Maruk, the woman who had turned my life into a storm. My voice came out steady, calm, almost peaceful. I choose truth, I said. Mahruch, I release you. From this marriage, from this lie. If your happiness lies with Rehan, then so be it. I will not let revenge destroy us further. The sheikh lowered his head. Rehan's eyes filled with tears. Maruk stared at me, speechless. In that silence, I felt the weight lift from my heart. The storm outside howled louder, but within me there was finally peace. The storm outside grew calmer by dawn, as if nature itself had sighed after witnessing the chaos of our hearts. That night had broken every chain of pride, deceit, and illusion that bound us together. Maruk stood silently, her face pale and her eyes swollen from tears. Rehan remained motionless, staring at the ground while the sheikh sat slumped in his chair, his once commanding posture reduced to fragile remorse. The house that had once glittered with wealth now echoed with only truth, raw, painful, and pure. When the cleric arrived the next morning, I spoke the words that ended everything. My voice did not shake, though my heart did. I divorce Maruk, I said clearly, and each word carried years of buried pain. The cleric nodded solemnly. Then the marriage is dissolved. A strange stillness followed, not of sorrow, but of quiet relief. Maruk looked at me, her lips trembling. For the first time, there was no pride in her eyes, only regret. Naeem, she whispered, I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to survive. I gave a faint smile. Survival, bought with lies, always costs more than death, I replied softly. Rehan stepped forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. Brother, he said, his voice breaking, I wronged you without knowing who you were. You lost everything because of my hatred? I looked into his eyes, the reflection of my own blood, and said, we were both victims of a man's arrogance and a woman's fear. Let's not turn it into more hate. He pulled me into an embrace, and for the first time, I felt the warmth of family, something I had never known, not even as a child. The sheikh, now pale and trembling, spoke weakly. I have sinned more than anyone here. I took your father's life, your childhood, and your name, and when the time came for redemption, I failed again. He looked at me with eyes full of tears. Can you forgive me, Naeem? I nodded slowly. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, Sheikh Sahib, but it allows the future to breathe. Weeks later, Maruk and Rehan were married quietly. I did not stay to witness it. I left the mansion behind and began a new life in a distant town, working honestly with my own hands. People called me poor, but for the first time I felt rich in truth, in dignity, and in peace. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see the servant I once was, but behind him stands the man I became. I whisper to my reflection, I was a servant in the sheikh's house, but truth made me greater than them all. And with that, I walk on, no longer chained by lies, but carried by the quiet strength of redemption.